I'm a big fan of comic books, especially older comic books. Now, I know that comics have always had a lot of issues depending on, well, I guess they have both issues and issues as well. Well, clever pun there. Depending on what you're reading. And Spider-Man has had both. This character has gone on for decades upon decades, and once you cross that line and continue a story for that long, it does become very hard to consistently write good stories. I think anybody can agree with that, whether they love new modern Spider-Man comics or they think they're trash. I think pretty much everybody can agree that once you drag something out forever, it becomes very hard to actually write something good with it. Now, I made an entire video breaking down why I think a lot of modern comic books for Spider-Man in particular are garbage, and citing things from One More Day continuing on into present day basically, all the way down to their handling of characters like Ben Reilly. I actually was talking about that on Twitter a couple weeks ago, and how they decided to bring back this fan favorite character, write a very good, little mini series for him, and then immediately turn him into a supervillain just in order to shake things up. Spider-Man has been in the process of, if we shake things up, it will make a good story for over a decade now, while also maintaining a very boring status quo of Peter Parker can't have any stability in his life, he can't be with Mary Jane Watson, he can't have stable relationships, he can't have kids, he can't have this or that, even though a lot of fans have pushed back against that idea. The success of a character like Peter B. Parker in the Spider-Verse films goes to show that actually people want that out of Spider-Man. They want to see the character grow and move on and become someone more than he is, not stay in the exact same place he's been in since 2005. But of course, nobody at Marvel editorial actually wants to see that happen. A few times we've gotten people like Nick Spencer who came in and did their best to try and bring Spider-Man back to what people loved, but it really felt like Marvel editorial themselves wouldn't actually let him commit to it. And the point that I'm getting at now is that we're finally getting answers on why Mary Jane and Peter Parker are no longer together in Spider-Man comics. And here's the thing with it. I no longer really care if they're together or not. At one point, I very much loved this relationship, especially in the 90s of Spider-Man comics. I thought it was done very, very well, and I thought Mary Jane was always a very strong character. Before I get the Galaxy Brain YouTube comment that comes up anytime you say you don't care about something, yes, of course I care enough to make a video complaining a bit about it, okay? But I don't care enough to keep buying these issues and reading them. In fact, I have not bought an issue of Spider-Man now in years. I've read some of them, take that for what you will, but I have not bought them because they just don't go anywhere. They don't provide any substance to the character, nor do they evolve him in any meaningful way. In my opinion, one of the last evolutions of this character actually came during the Superior Spider-Man arc, and it didn't really evolve Peter Parker as much as it evolved Dr. Otto Octavius, who, by the way, they have now gone back on and basically put back to status quo of just being evil, metal-armed, super genius villain, undoing all of that character development for no damn reason other than money, 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 money. Before I get further into this video, if you do enjoy what we're talking about today, I do appreciate you leaving a like and subscribing, and if you don't find my voice incredibly irritating, I have created a new channel, The King of Creepy, where I actually do horror narrations, and this is from stories online all the way to classic literature. I'm going to start doing some narrations of classic horror literature there as well, because it's a passion of mine. So if you're interested in checking that out, the link is in the description down below. And my wife Jill has been working very hard on her channel, Magical Jill, where I am actually on a lot of her videos too. We've recently been covering Pokemon, so if you're a fan of that, please check that out in the description down below. But I want to kind of get back to the point here as well. And The Amazing Spider-Man 23 actually recently came out. I believe it was on April 5th. And it started to shine some actual light and details on the reason why Peter and Mary Jane are no longer together. And essentially what it comes down to is this. In a previous story, Spider-Man fought this Mayan God and prevented him from becoming all-powerful, okay? This Mayan God, in an alternate reality, is a very powerful deity and being who controls this version of the world. Spider-Man and Mary Jane are transported to that dimension, which we haven't been told forever, by the way. We've been wondering what happened for a very, very long time, actually since this new story arc started, and Peter Parker and MJ have been not together at all after rekindling their relationship in the previous run. People have been wondering, well, what happened? So apparently what happened is this. They got put in this alternate reality. Peter Parker made a device that just happened to have enough power to send one person back to the normal reality, not more than one, and he was going to use it on Mary Jane, which, by the way, this is already an incredibly contrived plot device. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this plot in something else of, we have enough power, but only enough for one of us to go. It's not that you can't do that, but I've seen that a trillion times, okay? Like, that plot device is almost more overdone than Peter Parker's melodrama, being a staple of Spider-Man comics, is overdone. But I digress. So they went with that plot point, and Peter is just getting the shit kicked out of him. And it's worth noting that there's a lot of contrivances to this story that drive the plot forward. Basically, if they were to kill Spider-Man in this world, that Mayan God would become more powerful by absorbing his power. How does that work and why does it work? It doesn't really matter, it's a comic book, but that's the story. So, in order to prevent that, Mary Jane uses this device to send Peter Parker out of that reality while she stays there. Earlier on in that reality, they had met this researcher named Paul, who nobody cares about. Like, no one in the entire world cares about Paul. I'm being serious. Like, I have never seen anybody praise the Paul storyline. Even, like, people who gobble up Marvel D, like, even currently with their comic books, they're not praising Paul. They don't care. But Paul is there with Mary Jane now. When Peter gets back to New York, he actually realizes that, oh, even though I felt like I was gone for days there, maybe a week, actually it was a few hours here. So that means that the longer he spends in New York or in the normal Marvel world, the longer Mary Jane is trapped there. Now, I will say we don't have every single detail yet on this storyline, and I don't want to make a follow-up when we do, because it's already so stupid that I just don't even need more details on it. But essentially it breaks down to Peter goes back, he's desperate to get Mary Jane back, so he does a bunch of douchey stuff. He steals clothes from people, which is a very not Spider-Man thing to do. But you know what? Hey, I was fine with Identity Crisis in the 90s where Peter did some out-of-character things because he's desperate. Sometimes when you're desperate, you do out-of-character things, so it's whatever, you know? I mean, like, we're also talking about a character who one time accidentally punched a woman in the face and killed her because he thought it was Wolverine behind him, and everybody just kind of forgot about that and moved on. So let's just move past the clothes stealing detail. It's not really a huge deal, it's whatever. And then move on to the fact that he dicks down pretty much every superhero in the Marvel Universe at this point. It's very bizarre, out of character behavior for him because he's confronted by the Fantastic Four. You have to remember that when he returns to normal New York, it was actually in an explosion. Because what happens is the body of this Mayan God crashes down into New York and causes an explosion. So basically, people saw Spider-Man fall out of the sky and a mini nuke go off, and then Spider-Man run away, right? So that looked bad for him. That's very Spider-Man to do, like run away when something bad happens in order to prevent something worse and be willing to look bad. So I don't really have a problem with that. I mean, Spider-Man all the time has to run away from the police or escape a situation that might make him look bad and still end up looking bad, and that's just who he is, right? He's not the Captain America where he stands there with the Avengers and can issue a press release. He's just not that guy. So when he gets to the Baxter building in order to talk to the Fantastic Four to try and get Reed Richards to help him get back to this dimension, they basically say, well, Reed's not here right now, so we're not going to let you use his technology. And by the way, people think you caused that explosion, so we're not going to help you. This was a very silly idea, and it makes no sense. It's very clearly just written for melodrama, and I think it shows just how ridiculous and boring Marvel Comics has become in some ways, at least Spider-Man in particular, I will say. There are good Marvel Comics still coming out today. I just think that they are by very specific authors, okay? Well, apparently running from the Fantastic Four, instead of just saying very simply, hey, listen, Mary Jane and I ended up in this alternate dimension, time is going faster there, and she's in danger, I need to go now, I'm really putting my foot down on this. Apparently, instead of doing this multiple sentence explanation and getting a little into it, he decides it's faster to just run away. So there's a lot of problems with the writing here, obviously, and also problems with the character dynamics too, because someone like Human Torch, obviously Johnny, with how close of friends him and Peter are, he wouldn't even need this full-on explanation. He would have his back regardless. Like, yes, he's also going to back up the Fantastic Four, but he wouldn't purposely corner and put Peter in a situation where he would have to run from him. That's just not something that at this point in character development should be happening. But again, I'm citing character development and also including it in the same sentence as Spider-Man, so that's kind of the problem, I think, right there. Then he's confronted by Captain America as well, and so instead of explaining it to Captain America, he also fights him. Now, there are ways to have Spider-Man fight people, by the way. Again, Superior Spider-Man did it very well. I also think in the original Civil War arc, out-of-character moments aside for certain characters, I thought that the confrontation in Amazing Spider-Man between Spider-Man and Captain America was done incredibly well. There's a lot of deep themes and issues behind it that actually, I would say, added to this conflict and made it very interesting despite it only being a few panels. It was actually powerful. I think that though now the idea is basically banging action figures together, right? It's like, well, this thing good, they fight even better. You know, that's really what this comes off to me as. Like, what if we make this climactic storyline where Spider-Man fights the Fantastic Four and then he has to fight against Captain America and this and that? It's like, you can't do that if you have no, like, actual reason for it, right? If there is a way to write around that and it's just Spider-Man, who is a genius, could just tell these people, hey, look, I'm desperate. This is what happened. This is the woman that I'm with. I need you to help me. And that's it. You can very easily write around that. And that's the big problem I have with this. He does like a very minor explanation, but he really doesn't try at all to get anyone to see his side of things. He's just like, whatever, fuck you guys now, I'm going to take you out. This is not a very Spider-Man thing to do at all. And it goes to show just how this character has been changed to fit any writer who writes him for a very long time. I think there used to be a very consistent through thread of who the character of Spider-Man was, at least probably until about 2005-ish. When you start getting into things like Back in Black, it does start to suffer a little, but I had thought that it was going to bounce back and go a really interesting direction. One More Day, though, kind of just sealed the deal. And I see a lot of people say, actually, when I bring this up, a lot of people bring up the Clone Saga, and they're like, actually, Jay, you're wrong. The Clone Saga was the downfall of Spider-Man. And I completely disagree. There's things I like about the Clone Saga. There's certainly things I don't like. But overall, it gave us some really great characters. It overstayed its welcome and lasted too long. I agree with that. But it did create characters like Ben Reilly or Kane, who were very, very interesting in the Spider-Man mythos, and went on to kind of come into their own and really add to the overall lore and storyline of the Marvel Universe in a lot of meaningful ways. Whereas I'd say things like Spider-Man One More Day only spit in the face of everyone who was a fan of Spider-Man and added nothing to the character. At least around the time of things like the Clone Saga, we were actually getting interesting stories, and then later on, you know, they were still doing experimental stuff as well with Spider-Man in the 90s, making things like the May Parker Spider-Girl series, which I was lucky, by the way, enough to find issue 1 and 2 of at a store recently. I was at this store called Comic Book College, which is absolutely fantastic in Minnesota, so highly recommend them if you are ever in Minnesota and want to buy some comic books. Regardless, the whole story pretty much comes down to Spider-Man acts out of character while Mary Jane is stuck in this dimension with Paul. We don't know all of the details in terms of how long she ends up stuck there, because there's going to be more issues coming out getting more into this, but it's at the point where I just really don't care why she was there, how long she was there, etc. This is a very contrived plot. I have enough power in this device, but only for one person. Oh no, now this person is stuck in an alternate reality having to fend for themselves. Oh look, years went by. Oh no, now they're with this other man. It also doesn't fit who Mary Jane Watson is as a person, because she wouldn't do this. Mary Jane wouldn't just give up on Peter and be with another man just because of something like this. She would have really stuck it out and waited for him. This was always painted as Marvel's true love. You know, this is Superman and Lois. This is Romeo and Juliet. Maybe that's not like a great example because they both killed themselves, but you know what I mean. And you know what? Maybe readers can relate to Romeo and Juliet and their ending a lot more after having to struggle through reading Spider-Man comics for years. My personal headcanon being that Romeo personally just had enough of modern Spider-Man comics after one more day and, well, that was the story. Regardless, I think it's really sad how much time has affected this character, and even more than him affected Mary Jane Watson, because at least Spider-Man in a lot of ways is the same guy that he was in the early 2000s. It's just that nothing has progressed, nothing has changed around him to make the character better, more interesting, or grow and evolve. If anything, the stories around him have just completely devolved into repetitive mediocrity. But I think it's even more tragic what's happened to Mary Jane. And I might make a video about this at some point, but pretty much my opinion is this. At one point, Mary Jane was this stunning, very beautiful, very strong woman who was a supermodel, an actress. She was pretty much the woman everyone wanted to be, right? She rose up from sort of a bad home life and a lot of struggles and tribulations in her own life, and she was very strong. She got out of an abusive relationship with Harry Osborn, where the guy was just a dick. She was able to become her own character, not just a replacement of Spider-Man's love, Gwen Stacy, to the point where honestly people associate Mary Jane far more with the Spider-Man brand even now than they do with Gwen Stacy. Gwen Stacy is actually now often more associated with things like the Amazing Spider-Man movies or with Spider-Gwen, right? But Mary Jane is always this character associated with Spider-Man, his one true love. And over time, Marvel got a lot of cold feet. They felt like they had to please everybody, they felt like they had to change everything, and Mary Jane being a supermodel and being this gorgeous, beautiful woman, honestly, I don't know how else to say it, just this person on the outside who was very beautiful and very glamorous and high society in a lot of ways, but who loved Spider-Man and wanted to be with him regardless of being that way. They were very different in different ways. And instead of doing that, they thought, well, we have to change that. We have to make Mary Jane more down to earth. This isn't normal. Regardless of the fact that I, as a high school teacher, knew girls in my class, by the way, of like seniors and juniors who were going into modeling. They were literally going into modeling themselves. They were actually already doing modeling, by the way. So that's kind of crazy to me to act like nobody can do modeling. I understand that it's like not everyone can do it, but not everyone can be a scientist either, but they still kept that aspect of Peter Parker. So if they were trying to make it more relatable, I don't really understand what they did to Mary Jane in order to do that. Over time, they kept introducing more and more melodrama into the Peter Parker-Mary Jane relationship to the point where it just went downhill fast. And One More Day sealed the deal. It felt like Nick Spencer tried to undo that by bringing back this more classic representation of Mary Jane and trying to bring back this more classic representation of the Peter Parker-Mary Jane dynamic. And then, of course, again, that was done away with as well in the following run, which is probably my biggest problem with comic books now, is that yes, things used to be undone all the time, but there was the illusion that they wouldn't be. Right? You at least believed that things could have a lasting impact even if they usually didn't. That illusion has been stripped and gone from the comic book industry for at least a decade. Things don't feel like they have any impact anymore. Anything very emotional that happens or any big changes that happen are usually rolled back. In fact, it's actually almost impressive that Marvel has stuck to their guns so much with One More Day and not allowing Peter Parker and Mary Jane to be happy, because I suppose that's at least a lasting change that did happen. But it's just very odd to me because with all of this, it just comes down to they have not known what to do at all with this character. They have not known what to do at all with Spider-Man either, and so then when you put the two of them together in a room, it's just a disaster. Does it really matter why Mary Jane and Peter Parker are not together anymore? No, it doesn't. I'm sure it will sell to people because people eat up Spider-Man. It's just a brand recognition thing. You put him on the cover and people buy it, which is extremely unfortunate. I think that's one of the things that has led to the downfall of quality of his books is the built-in audience refusing to stop bending over in a back alley for Marvel editorial. But regardless, that's the way it is, and I can't force other people to not spend their money on drivel. I'm very frustrated with where this character has gotten and where the storylines have gone, and I think it says a lot that as someone who used to walk around carrying folders of Spider-Man comic books like an absolute nerd and having a backpack full of them all the way up through high school, who would read them every free second I had, now I don't even care anymore. You know, I'm at the point too where I'd rather just move on from Mary Jane and write her out of the story, because at least then I don't have to keep visually watching an abortion unfold panel to panel in every comic book she's in. I've always loved the dynamic of Spider-Man with Black Cat. I really like that relationship a lot, even though some people do not. And I'm a big sucker for the 80s where they were a major thing together, and I also love the symbiote Spider-Man run taking place back during that time that came out in the last handful of years that showed us other glimpses of that relationship, such as Felicia actually meeting Aunt May. So I will say, if they ever permanently move on from this storyline and just say, you know what, let's just actually show our hand here. We don't want Peter with Mary Jane anymore. We're just going to show you that and move on. You know what? It's stupid, but fine. Then have him be with Black Cat and actually have that relationship go somewhere meaningful. You know, there were a lot of people when Gwen Stacy died that thought that was Peter's meaningful relationship and that was now over, right? They were never expecting Mary Jane Watson to be the next thing and to be the one that's actually most associated with Spider-Man. So I absolutely think you can move on from Mary Jane if you really must. I don't know if it's a good idea. Honestly, I don't think it has been since really 2007 or 2008, but you can do that if you really need to. I just think then you have to actually make something else be meaningful. The problem is, you know, Spider-Man is now with Black Cat, and we all know what's going to happen. It won't last. Nothing lasts in these books, except for one more day for some damn reason. I don't know why that's the one lasting thing, but it is. It definitely is. So that's like the one change that has lasted, and it's one of the worst ones that's come out of the comic book industry in a lot of years. It's very pathetic that this is the place where Spider-Man comics have ended up. I don't understand why people still go out of their way to buy them. Other than issue 1s and first appearances, that seems like the only thing that would maybe be worth your time. But again, what do I know? Like, I'm the person who's poor recording from an office, and these people are making bank off of very mediocre stories. So clearly they're doing something well that I'm not. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'm interested to read your thoughts on this whole thing. It's just extremely frustrating to me, and I just genuinely feel like Marvel editorial has been pretty brain dead around this character for a lot of years. It says a lot when your general fan base and even audiences who are coming into the comic book industry to actually start reading them for the first time are more excited for flashback issues. People being more excited for things like Spider-Man Ben Reilly, more excited for things like the symbiote Spider-Man, Crossroads, and the other, branching off stories of that. People being more excited for things like Renew Your Vows. I think it says a lot when people are more excited for these miniseries than they are for your main comic book. I get that it sells, but people are buying it because they're a glutton for punishment. They can't look away from the train wreck, It's not because they liked it, it's because it was so mesmerizingly horrible that they just couldn't look away. I'm interested to hear your thoughts down below. Please leave a like if you enjoyed this and subscribe for more content. I appreciate you all very much. I hope you have a fantastic day and stay shway.